Welcome back, everybody. Here we are in part two. We're continuing the discussion of the modern gaming experience. Now, last part was focused a little bit more on the gamer. If you haven't watched that, it's a pretty short video, only about 17 minutes long. This one I'm sure is going to be longer, judging by what's gone into it so far. This part is going to be about the developer trends. And there's a lot of interesting stuff to look at. I'm going to explain that to you and give you a rundown of what's to come in a moment. But before that, I wanted to address the general response that I got from part one. So a lot of you were actually in approval of things like save states and other tools. I mean, at this point, I've learned to live with them. I'm not necessarily approving of them, and I'm going to tell you why. I just want to have a little bit of caution. First of all, I have to query whether or not the reason why so many people have tools and use tools now in these games is because possibly developers have been failing to make engaging games, or maybe they've just been missing the mark slightly on things like getting the right level of difficulty, making a challenge a little bit too tedious, making something cost too much of your time, and not having enough of a reward. Rain World. But if that's not the case, then there's something wrong with the gamers. And that's what I want to caution. If it is on the fault of the gamers that we are a little bit too lazy, that we are a little bit too preoccupied with how we spend our time and needing our time to be spent as efficiently as possible, then I would just say, you know what, developers, beware catering to that kind of lazy, tired gamer. My fear is that it might manifest in some games or gameplay that just aren't all that exciting, that are devoid of any kind of meaningful challenge. All right, so let me now cover what you will be seeing in this video. First of all, there's going to be a data section. And in the data section, we have stats for consumer trends, what are people streaming and watching, and what are people buying. And then we have stats for the developer trends. What games are being made? Are we seeing new IPs, or are we actually just seeing the continuation of so many familiar series? Also, what about remakes and remasters? How many of those are we getting compared to original new games? Then, after the data section, I'm going to be giving you my opinions as I discuss specific games and certain gameplay trends. Here are the points that we're going to cover. I will be addressing the concern made in the last video about modern gameplay designs that expedite the adventure. And I will also explain that and clarify that a little bit better. We're also going to be looking at gameplay mechanics and trendy games. We're going to ask, has the quality of games increased or worsened over the years? How about the prevalence of microtransactions? And also, one thing I thought of, what is the shelf life of a game? Now, there are some things, some questions, topics that I will not be answering or covering in this video, but they should still be concerned, because these are certainly things that could impact the trends that we're seeing or the trends that developers are following. And they are the following: mobile and gacha games. That's just... it's a whole new subsection of the industry that you could spend an hour on. I'm also wondering, who invests in Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft? What defines a successful release? And what are good sales numbers for indie games versus AAA games? How long and expensive is game development? Can we observe clear cycles as they relate to trends? This is a funny one. People's attention spans, and more specifically, how people's attention spans relate to consumerism. And then finally, the last thing that I repeat, we will not be addressing in this video are the developers' political motivations, because whether you want to ignore them or not, a lot of games are clearly being made with some sort of political motivation or some sort of investment based on that. But we're not covering that in this video. There's already plenty to talk about. So let's get into it. All right. One moment, everybody. Before you go on with the video, I just have to interrupt briefly. I just finished recording parts 1 and 2. So those are the stats for the consumer trends and the stats for the developer trends. They were much longer recordings than I'd anticipated. If you would rather not spend so long on this video, you can skip those sections and go straight to my opinions. I will include in the description the spreadsheets that I am reading from, okay? If you would rather just listen to me talk and you want to follow along on the screen, no problem, enjoy a longer video. If you want to make this a little bit shorter for yourself, again, the information that I'm reading from is available in the description. And you can just skip ahead to part 3, or however it's going to be labeled, where I talk about my opinions. All right? Otherwise, enjoy watching. Section 1, the consumer trends. And what does the modern gamer like? I thought that I could answer this by going on Twitch, or at least looking at some Twitch statistics for the last 2 years. I want to shout out this company, this website, Sully Gnome. So all of the information, unless otherwise stated, is being pulled from Sully Gnome for Twitch.com. And what did I expect to find compared to reality? What did I actually find? I expected that there would be maybe 10 plus different most popular games mixing into the top, right? Top 3, top 5, whatever it may be. I thought that we'd be seeing a lot of games going in and out of the rotation and maybe staying there as the most popular games on Twitch for 1, 2, or 3 months at a time. I was dead wrong. I was really, really wrong. So before I get into showing you the data in a month-by-month breakdown, I want to highlight basically the past 30 days. When I pulled this information, it was on January 28th. So we are looking at December 29th, 2023 to January 28th, 2024. I'm going to, well, I'll just present it like this. First of all, we had just chatting ranking as the #1 overall category. The most popular category on Twitch was just chatting. It had the most watch time, it had the highest peak viewers, and it had the highest average viewers. So Twitch is a far cry from what it was when I used to, occasionally watch some streams on there. I was tuning in for esports tournaments to catch some Dota, some StarCraft 2. Sometimes my friends would stream, sometimes I would stream, sometimes I would watch some Pokemon or Zelda speedruns. And I remember as I was phasing out of Twitch, IRL streaming was becoming a thing, and I couldn't stand it. The further that we got away from just Twitch as a pure gaming service, I felt like gaming itself was going to be more and more diluted, right? And it kind of worried me because I didn't know if something else became more popular than the gameplay, if something became more popular than the games themselves, like people entertaining with them, or a non-gaming related category entirely. What would that spell for the future of the games? Anyways, we're going to try to find out some of that stuff. So that was just chatting, #1 for that month. In #5 was Fortnite. So it had the most stream time, actually more than double than just chatting stream time, and the most streamers, also more than double that of just chatting. What does that mean? There are twice as many people trying to stream Fortnite. they're streaming for twice as long as well. So there's this whole generation, and I'm not going to assume that's a generation with an age cutoff, because I'm sure there are people around my age trying to become the next Fortnite streamer. It's just really humorous to me that there's so many people trying to make it big streaming Fortnite, and yet most people are actually investing their time into watching just chatting, whatever the heck that looks like. At #7 was Pal World. So Pal World had the peak, or I didn't say it had the #1, but Pal World's peak viewers across the platform for that 30-day period were 430,000. It's a massive number. And yet, it still fell below the peak viewers that tuned into just chatting, League of Legends, Minecraft, GTA 5, and Fortnite. Now, I say it fell below those games. I mean, Pal World is still tremendously successful, still tremendously popular. So to be less popular at any one moment than just chatting, League of Legends, Minecraft, GTA 5, and Fortnite, not a big deal. One more thing before I show you what a lot of these look like in a spreadsheet. In 2023, so for what we're about to look at, certain titles not shown in the charts made the top 50 games on Twitch, at least briefly. And these notable entries include, in order of average viewers, Call of Duty Warzone, Teamfight Tactics, Rust, Dead by Daylight, FIFA 23, Hearthstone, Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege, I used to play that, Genshin Impact, and Street Fighter 6. And then when I was tinkering the stats a little bit and adjusting the filters just a touch to accommodate for some other games that were not available all year long, I was able to find entries like Lethal Company and Baldur's Gate 3 poked into the top 25 at least for some time. So again, that was in order of average viewers. So for some period of time, Lethal Company and Baldur's Gate 3 were in the top 25 for average viewers on Twitch. Now, let me go over that spreadsheet and see what I want to share with you here. You can see that each month is categorized, is sorted on its own, and I've pulled the top 5 ranked games. I'm gonna touch on that in a moment. I pulled the top 5 ranked games for every month. I did not know that just chatting would be the most popular every single month, And at the end of compiling this, I didn't want to go back and change everything. I mean, you could view it as a top 4, or you can view it as the gaming landscape is changing, right? The gaming landscape now accommodates this weird, for lack of a better term, kind of normie, ogling. Like, what are people doing when they watch just chatting? They're just listening to people talk? I don't know. If any of you have somebody who you watch, you can try to explain it to me. I don't mean to sound like an old man who's disconnected from everything, doesn't know how things work. I know how these things work. It's just, as I've gotten older, I can't believe that people still spend their time watching it. And even when I was younger, like I said, I was at least tuned into gameplay, and mostly esports, because I played those games competitively as well. So I was always learning as I watched the tournaments. This is just sheer waste of time. But I'll move on. Don't want to upset anybody. So I'm going to try to breeze through these. 2022, here we are at the start of the year with January. We have League of Legends, GTA 5, Escape from Tarkov, and Valorant. Get used to hearing a few of those titles over and over. And you can see the average viewers are anywhere between 100,000 and almost 400,000. Or for the games themselves, 100,000 and 250,000. And that doesn't really change too much. It goes up and down a little bit, but that's pretty consistent. Then February, Lost Ark broke in. I don't even know what Lost Ark is. Is that the Amazon game? Is that the Amazon MMO? Might be. I should have looked that up before this, but hey, what can you do? League of Legends again, GTA 5, Valorant. 2022 March. Elden Ring popped in. Nice to see that. But here's what's surprising. Elden Ring falls off, right? It's not there anymore in April. And I thought Elden Ring would have much more longevity on Twitch. Not the case. Let's keep on going. And I'm just going to kind of be scrolling through over here. And I want you to observe for yourself what games appear. Fortnite, Counter-Strike. That should be Counter-Strike too. Counter-Strike again, GTA 5 again, Valorant again. Oh, there's Apex Legends in July. In August, we have Minecraft. Still, as we go along, the average viewers are more or less consistent. We're getting towards the end of 2022 now, and in December, we have World of Warcraft breaking into the top 5, but still, look at what surrounds it. GTA 5, League of Legends, and Valorant. People love their Riot games. People love their multiplayer games. People love shenanigans, I guess, in GTA 5. I never got into the online mode, so I can't say what is so appealing about it. If you were to ask me for my biased opinion, I would say nothing is appealing. But that's just me. Let's go back over here now and check out the frequency that games appear for 2022. So I've sectioned this off over here, and I've counted the number of times that these games appeared, the maximum being 12 for 12 months. Just chatting, League of Legends, GTA 5, they were always staples in what people were watching. And the average rank that they appeared on the list, you could see there, just chatting was always first place. League of Legends averaged second, Grand Theft Auto averaged third. Valorant appeared many, many times, 11 to be exact, and it usually ranked fourth. And then Minecraft and Counter-Strike each popped in at least a couple of times, usually averaging in the fifth position. The games that appeared just briefly, once throughout the year. Lost Ark, Elden Ring, the only single-player game, right? Yeah, Elden Ring, the only single-player game, so good for it. Overwatch 2, World of Warcraft, Escape from Tarkov, cannot speak, Apex Legends, Dota 2, and Fortnite. And Dota 2 would have crept in there when it had the International, I'm sure. Now let's look at 2023. Honestly, looking at this is kind of disgusting, not gonna lie. I cannot hide my disgust. I don't really like many of these games. Whatever. What can you do? This is how people entertain themselves, I guess. And you know what? Maybe I should have expanded the list beyond the top 5. I will touch on that again later. 2023 January. League of Legends, Tarkov, GTA, Valorant. February. Hogwarts Legacy. So we have another single-player game breaking in there. I'm happy to see that. But then it goes away in March. April. Looks very similar. Counter-Strike, maybe they were having a tournament and that's why it's in there for a couple of months. And then in June, Diablo breaks in. So good for Diablo, I guess. It's never been a series that I've been interested in. I've played Diablo clones before, but never any of the main series games. July, we go back to what we're familiar with. August, September, October, there's Dota 2 again. Must be the International. November, World of Warcraft creeps in again. Maybe people just like playing World of Warcraft at the end of the year. Maybe that's when expansion's released. And then we close the year in December. You can see there the average viewers, actually pretty low for that fifth place game. People really just want to watch their favorites. League of Legends, Fortnite, Grand Theft Auto 5. So what does it look like for the frequency in which games appear? For 2023, Just Chatting, League, and GTA 5, 1, 2, 3 again. Valorant and Counter-Strike, 4 and 5 again. But this time there was a little bit more changing of the guard at the very bottom. Fortnite crept in a couple of times, World of Warcraft crept in a couple of times, and then we saw Diablo once, Escape from Tarkov again, Dota, and Hogwarts Legacy, like I mentioned. But some of those games that were there in 2022 did not appear in 2023. This is interesting to me. The number of unique games that appeared in the top 5, and this is including Just Chatting, in 2022, we had 14 games on rotation. In 2023, only 11 games on rotation. So what was happening there? Like, people, their tastes have become even more narrow, that they're not even broadening their tastes to watch different games anymore. The League of Legends fans have doubled down on League of Legends. The Valorant fans have doubled down on Valorant. Does it mean something like that? Not sure necessarily. It's just an interesting thing that I observed. So I think I can leave that as it is for now. We will return to talking about Twitch at some point in the future. And we're going to be moving on to the best-selling games. The information gathered here is 2017 to 2023. The 10 best-selling games in the US. I got these from GameSpot articles, and GameSpot got their information cited from Circana, formerly known as the NPD Group. If any of you are more interested in those kinds of statistics, you can check out the website. Also, one of the Circana staff, Matt Piscatella, I saw his Twitter account. He posts a lot about different game statistics and sales and things of that nature. So if you're into the numbers or some insights into the industry, he might be somebody worth following. I haven't checked out his account too much. I just thought it was an interesting find. Now, the information that I'm displaying, I believe with 99% certainty that these are unit sales. GameSpot did not actually qualify these as unit sales. However, when I looked at Circana's stats themselves, they had two breakdowns. They had the sales revenue, the dollar sales, and then they had the unit sales. And those were two different looking sheets, two different looking charts. And the GameSpot charts more similarly resembled the copies sold. Okay? There are a couple caveats here. Digital sales for some console games and PC games were not included, but it doesn't really affect too much here, I don't think. And I also just want to mention one more thing. When you just try to Google this kind of stuff, you try to yield your own information, you try to do your own research on these topics, you will find that a lot of this information is hidden. Now, some of it should be released in different financial reports, but it's not like the companies are required to disclose everything with the public. So it's not like you can go to 2022, get Sony's and Nintendo's and all of their financial reports and know exactly how much money was made and how many units for everything was sold. Sometimes they disclose that information, sometimes they don't. All right, let me get in here. First, let me share with you a few of my observations, and then we'll go through the list together. So first, I observed that only 5 new series or IPs cracked the top 10 for most games sold in this span of years, 2017 to 23. 5. Maybe that's pretty good, maybe not. You'll see it in the context of the whole list. Another thing that I observed, people love commercialized games. Surprise, surprise, I know, but I was just hoping for a little bit more. Because I don't actually pay attention to commercialized games, I don't keep up with the Maddens, I don't keep up with the EAs and the Call of Duties every single year. I suppose I'd forgotten just how popular those games actually are, and looking at these lists was a very clear reminder that they are some of the most popular games in the world year after year. So the top 10 lists are disappointing, but not surprising, I suppose. I will also point out, I tried to gather some commonalities when looking at game length, and really it didn't yield notable results. So I eventually shifted away from trying to identify a trend with that. And what we will spend the most time looking at, perhaps, genres, all right? You will see that open world games are always popular. Shooters, Call of Duty specifically, and sports games never die. And I will point out, you won't see it on these lists because this is for US only, but on other websites I saw that sports games differ regionally. So in America, you've got Madden, you've got football, American football. In Canada, you've got NHL. And for the rest of the world, it's typically FIFA. soccer or football for you Europeans. 2017. I noted that you're happy if you own a Switch. Call of Duty, NBA 2K, Destiny 2, Madden, some boring games. And then Breath of the Wild, GTA 5, Ghost Recon Wildlands, a bit of a surprise. Star Wars Battlefront 2, Super Mario Odyssey, and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. So 2017 was the year that the Switch dropped. You can see here I made a list or a mention of some notable breakthroughs to get into this top 10. And on the far right, I've got new Series 0 because we've seen all of these series before, right? With 2017, Super Mario Odyssey appears to be a lone outlier with its relatively short game length. Other games may have short campaigns, but they offer more with multiplayer. And GTA 5, Ghost Recon, and Zelda have their open worlds. Other games have their online or local multiplayers. What do we have in 2018? Look at that! Red Dead Redemption beating the sports games and beating Call of Duty. I'm actually happy to see that. So I put it there as a notable breakthrough. I also put up Super Smash Bros. Ultimate because it got into the top 5. And Marvel's Spider-Man, I guess superheroes, they weren't dead at this point. Superheroes and Marvel was thriving. So there it is in the top 10 as well. You can see, looking at all of the games, open world is booming. Again, Red Dead Redemption 2, Spider-Man, Far Cry 5, Assassin's Creed Odyssey. And one thing that you'll notice as we look at more years, 2018 and onward, Sony games are typically the shortest of the bunch, at or below 20 hours, right? Spider-Man, God of War. Other games from other companies, they either offer more replayability, like a Mario Kart 8, especially compared to The Last of Us 2. All right. Or, of course, they have their online multiplayer, which is another facet of replayability. 2019. Notable breakthroughs. Borderlands 3, top 5. Mortal Kombat 11, also top 5. And Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. Now, maybe I just forgot how popular Star Wars was here, but it always surprises me when the Star Wars video game does really well. Maybe they're some of the most popular games of all time, and I've just been sleeping on them. I've played KOTOR. I don't mean I've been sleeping on them with how their quality is. I just mean I've been ignorant of the fact of how popular they are. So there it is. Borderlands 3, though, coming out so high in the list, that really is shocking to me. Looking at 2019, should some other games maybe have come out ahead of it? Maybe Super Smash Bros. Ultimate could have. And I have here a new series, Star Wars Jedi. So, of course, we've seen Star Wars before, but at least Star Wars Jedi is a new sub-series of Star Wars, and if you don't want to count it, that's okay. Maybe Borderlands 3 did so well because of marketing. Star Wars and Kingdom Hearts both come from beloved and storied franchises, and good for Mortal Kombat 11 because it's the only classic fighting game to appear on these lists. Okay, 2020. You are happy in 2020 if you own a PlayStation. The Last of Us Part 2, Ghost of Tsushima, Final Fantasy VII Remake. Finally, we're getting Final Fantasy VII Remake, huh? They'd only teased that forever. Felt like it anyway. And Nintendo snuck in Animal Crossing with the pandemic and found success marketing Super Mario 3D All-Stars. If I'm remembering correctly, they said that there were going to be a limited number of copies, right? Physical copies. So the notable breakthroughs, like I said, Animal Crossing would not have done so well if not for the pandemic. Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I guess Assassin's Creed is just one of those series that I shouldn't be surprised at, but I am. And The Last of Us Part 2, I think it still did better than expected, especially beating Final Fantasy VII Remake. Now, what does that mean? More of a mainstream audience, maybe, that people are willing to play the story-driven game instead of the game that's based on a JRPG? I don't know. And of course, we have a true new series, a true new IP in Ghost of Tsushima. So maybe for you, this is the first new one on the list, period. 2021. Pokemon remakes show the continued success of the series, even when fans raised questions about the look of the games. Mario Kart 8 is still thriving. It just keeps on appearing. And as a horror game, Resident Evil 8 probably sold better than expected, thanks to its character designs and marketing. Yes, you all know exactly what I'm talking about. If you don't, just go Google Resident Evil 8, Resident Evil Village characters, and you can see a lot of the insane fandom that exploded because of those. So, some of the notable breakthroughs, like I mentioned, Pokemon competing with these big bad titles, Battlefield 2042, good for it slipping in there. People wanted a different shooter. and Spider-Man Miles Morales. So Spider-Man did so well that people were clamoring for another one, and there you go. 2022, single player games did very well. Elden Ring blew everyone away with its gameplay and sales and absolutely lived up to the hype. For me, that was the most impactful notable breakthrough. We also had God of War Ragnarok, which, if you remember the Game Awards of 2022, it was coming down to God of War versus Elden Ring, and Elden Ring just narrowly took it. Again, maybe it's Star Wars, maybe it's Lego. I just think it's really funny that Lego Star Wars, the Skywalker Saga, managed to break into the top 10. Again, for copies sold. It outsold Pokemon. Now, Pokemon was not available all year long, so Lego could have been released earlier in the year, but that is just so funny to see. And for new series, Elden Ring, a truly new IP. Pokemon Legends, I have it there, kind of like Star Wars Jedi. If you don't agree, no problem, but I think that it is a new series. And then finally, to wrap it up, in 2023, Hogwarts Legacy. This is the biggest surprise on all of the lists. Most people clearly did not grow out of their Harry Potter fandom. There it is at number 1, and I'm going to be talking more about it later. Some other notable breakthroughs, we have Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, and you know what? I still think that Tears of the Kingdom is underrated, but that's just me. We have EA Sports FC 24. It's the first new title appearance in what was formerly branded FIFA. So whenever you're used to FIFA 22, FIFA 23, well, not 23, there it is now. It's now EA Sports FC. And that is something about maybe EA not wanting to pay FIFA the $1 billion for the licensing, yet they still have the likeness of the players, so I'm not sure how that works. I could have it all mixed up, but it's an interesting story to look into. I haven't spent my time on it yet. Anyways, notable breakthroughs. I'm going to bring this up again later, but look at that, guys. Hogwarts Legacy, Tears of the Kingdom, and Spider-Man 2, all in the top 5. Only one Call of Duty, yeah, only one sport game, so good for those titles. Now, let us continue talking about 2023 just a little bit. Where is Baldur's Gate 3? Where is Starfield? By 2024, Hogwarts Legacy had sold 24 million copies and generated over $1 billion in revenue. EA Sports FC 24, by comparison, the 10th place game, has had at least 11 to 14 million unique players, and it could have generated at least $8 million if those are with full price sales. Now, I have to speculate because that information was not publicly available, at least I could not find it. It is what it is. Here's what's interesting. According to VG Insights, I will link that in the description as well as the other website that I mentioned before, Baldur's Gate 3 was the #1 game released on Steam last year. It made $657 million in full game revenue. And if I have that wrong, of course, please correct me in the comments and let everyone else know. But I did look it up again. It was a little bit murky, a little bit obscure, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is. So that's Baldur's Gate. But what does the market share look like with Hogwarts Legacy being even more successful? If Baldur's Gate occupied Steam, and presumably all of PC gaming, then Hogwarts Legacy must have crushed it on consoles. That's what the market share gets into. Who occupied PlayStation sales? Who occupied Xbox sales? Who occupied PC sales? Also on Steam, Starfield made $235 million in full game revenue as well. So Starfield looks like it pales in comparison to Baldur's Gate 3, but it crushed it on Xbox. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but I read that it could have been 3 times as much as what it made on PC. My final thoughts now on the sales data. On one hand, it feels like looking at the top 10 of each year didn't provide enough information because the annual Call of Duties and the sports games, they occupy so many of those precious spots. Similar to what happened when looking at Twitch in the top 5, you don't necessarily get the full picture of what games are slipping in and out of popularity or which genres are slipping in and out of popularity. For example, maybe if I had expanded my research to include top 20s, I would have confirmed my hunch that JRPGs have surged in overall popularity throughout recent years. On the other hand, seeing the games month after month and year after year is exactly the kind of information that I set out to discover. The majority of gamers, or at least the majority of buyers, if you want to argue that these aren't real gamers, it's okay. They are occupying themselves with the same games year after year. They just cannot get enough of their Madden. They can't get enough of their Call of Duty. Now, I think that this is when you have to take the mainstream into account, and especially the athletes. There are a lot of professional athletes and college athletes in the world, and they also want to see themselves in these video games. They also want to support the games because they in turn support themselves, right? So I'm pretty sure every single athlete, or at least like 90% of them, are going to have a PlayStation or an Xbox or both and be picking up their versions of whatever video games they're in. As for Call of Duty, I don't know. It's been a mystery to so many people why Call of Duty is as popular as it is. Maybe it's the same thing. Maybe it's just kind of, it goes hand in hand with those sports games. So when you pick up your sports game of the year, you also pick up your Call of Duty. I don't know. We are going to get into section 2, the developer trends now. But before I do that, I want to piggyback off of what was said earlier. Where are the games like Persona 5 and the Atelier Ryza trilogy? Persona 5 has sold over 9 million copies to date, and surely that's enough for other developers to take notice. Persona 5, originally released in 2016, did it cause a significant increase in the popularity of JRPGs? Did it inspire other developers, other studios to tailor their JRPGs to those Persona 5 fans? Perhaps the bigger question is, when might you see the effect of that realized in the West? Right? You have to account for development times. So when a game takes 3 to 4 years to develop, you may not see the ripples of inspiration for another 3 to 4 years after that game has come out. As for Ryza, I was under the impression that it was incredibly popular before doing my research, but her games only sold over 2 million units. And I'm going to have to figure out in another video just how popular 2 million units is, just how successful that is for a studio. I think what we do know for the Atelier series is that those 2 million units sold are at least popular enough to jumpstart other miniseries in their games, right? They can do remakes, they can do remasters, and they can start to make more money off of those because either Ryza herself or the games have been popular enough. And like I said before, just to wrap this segue up, this is bordering more on how you actually define a game's success, and hopefully I will do a great job of looking into that in a future video. But for now, it is time to move on. Okay, this will be a fun one for many of you. Now we're going to look at release catalogs featuring mostly exclusive games. I've got Nintendo and I've got Sony. We're going back as far as 2020 all the way up to 2023. So we're going to be examining genres, we're going to be looking for new IPs, and we're going to be taking note of how many remakes and remasters appear in the calendar year. And I will note anything else that I deem remarkable. So, Nintendo in 2020. You can see here that I've got 10 games curated. They're just sorted alphabetically. They did release more than 10 titles, but I removed some of the fluff. For example, if something like Pokemon Cafe released between 2020 and 2023, I just took it out of the list. So we are looking at some of the most popular or some of the most well-known games. So, 10 games. 4 are JRPGs, and there's a variety of other genres. Good for JRPGs. There are no new IPs, so everything that you see here, you've seen before. Kirby, Pikmin, Paper Mario, etc. 5 remakes or remasters. That seems like a lot. 50% of the notable games are remade or remastered. And I think another notable thing is that you finally have the return of Paper Mario. People were wondering when it was going to come back to console. Of course, it did not come back in the most classic gameplay. We got something new. Now in 2021, Nintendo released 13 notable games, 3 of which were JRPGs, so those are still the most popular games that Nintendo's releasing. 2 of them were sports games. There was 1 new IP. Can you spot it? Game Builder Garage. I actually own that game. I'm looking forward to playing it at some point. I've been thinking that for a couple of years now, and if not this year, then I'm sure I'll get to it next year. 5 remakes or remasters again. However, because Nintendo released more games, this time there are 9 new games, at least if you include Bowser's Fury. 8 if you exclude it. Having played Bowser's Fury, I mean, it feels like a real game. It doesn't actually feel like a tech demo. There are plenty of things to collect in the game. There are plenty of different little worlds or areas for you to visit. So it's a nice, relatively short adventure, but not too short. Also notable, we had the return of Metroid and Pokemon Snap. Now, Bravely Default 2 was exclusive for about 6 months. I kept it in this list. And Pokemon Unite, I have it here as an outlier Pokemon game. And Pokemon Unite, I decided to include it because it's an online Pokemon game. Now, yes, it has an offline mode, but I thought it was so interesting that Nintendo is doing a MOBA with Pokemon. We've seen a lot of different and creative spin-offs with the Pokemon series, but Unite completely caught me by surprise. And then I think the last notable thing or surprising thing about that year, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl were outsourced. Yeah, so they were not actually developed by Nintendo. In 2022, we saw 10 games. 3 of them, once again, were JRPGs. We had a couple of strategy games there as well. And again, I ask you the question, is Pokemon Legends a new IP or not? I have it as yes, but I can understand if you say no because it's still Pokemon. It's not a new intellectual property, it's just a new offshoot. Fair enough. You know what, I should probably stop calling these things IPs and get a different term. There were 0 remakes and remasters. 10 new notable games. Huge! That is really impressive. Now, yes, one of them was only a timed exclusive. If you want to view it like there's only 9 new Nintendo games, fair enough, but it's still tremendous. And we have a new type of Kirby game, right? Forgotten Land started to explore the 3D world. And Triangle Strategy, that was the exclusive for 8 months. Finally, what did we see last year in 2023? 11 titles, 3 adventures, and 3 strategy games. So Nintendo just taking a small little break from JRPGs. You've received enough of them in the lifespan of the Switch. And if I had to guess, I would think a lot of the JRPGs are actually going to be coming out on Switch too. So that's probably why you didn't see them in 2023. 0 new IPs once again, 5 remakes or remasters, and 6 new games. Now, Tears of the Kingdom was the main attraction, but I gotta say, Nintendo still squeezing out so many other titles from beloved series. It deserves some commendation. I think 11 titles is nothing to complain about. So that's the end of Nintendo. I gotta say, I'm actually really impressed by what Nintendo did on the Switch. It has quickly become my favorite console of all time. I think it's the most bang for your buck. I mean, aside from the obvious ways that you can get tremendous value for your dollar, which we don't need to mention here, the Nintendo Switch is fantastic. Previously, I had the Nintendo 3DS for the second contender, but with the back catalog of Nintendo Switch, with all of these games coming forward as well, and with everything that you just saw there, I don't think that that was too many remakes and remasters, right? Even if it were 50%, the fact that Nintendo is still releasing at least as many new games per year, 5, 6, or 7 quality games, that gives you something to play every other month. I think they've been doing a good job. Let's contrast that now with PlayStation and Sony. So I should mention, Sony has been re-releasing a lot of games with enhancements for PS5. You're going to see some titles here where it's like, wait, that game came out so many years prior. It's because they re-release it for PS5. I'm not sure exactly what kind of tweaks are made, but the games are supposed to run optimally for PS5, and they're supposed to perform and look much better. All right, so in 2020, Demon's Souls, Sackboy, Spider-Man, Astro's Playroom, and Spider-Man Remastered. I should clarify, the previous one was Miles Morales. So 1 new one and 1 remaster. I will also differentiate here, because the website that I took this info from differentiated as well. There are 3 retail games and 2 PlayStation Network games. Now, for those of you who have PlayStation, are these PlayStation Network games basically shovelware? I have to ask, because what is Sackboy: A Big Adventure? What is Astro's Playroom? And the breakdown further is 3 new games and 2 remakes or remastered. So not that bad, but if you have a PlayStation, only 3 new exclusive titles. Then PlayStation in 2021. Destruction All-Stars, a whole lot of Nioh, Returnal, Ratchet and Clank, Ghost of Tsushima, couple of versions, Nioh, and Nioh again. There were 3 new games, only one of which remained exclusive. Nioh re-released 3 times. I'm not sure why the website split the collection from 1 and 2, but that's just how they sold them. Ghost of Tsushima re-released, and with multiplayer on PlayStation Network. That is what Legends is. So if you ask me, not too impressive. 2022, God of War Ragnarok, Gran Turismo 7, Horizon Forbidden West, looking a lot better now. The Last of Us Part 1, that's coming to PS5, and Uncharted Legacy of Thieves Collection, that's also coming to PS5. So that's where you get 3 new games and 2 remakes or remastered. I'm calling these ports remasters, all right? Finally, to wrap up, in 2023, PlayStation released Final Fantasy XVI. We all know that that did not do as well as it could have. Gran Turismo 7 with VR support. Horizon Forbidden West Complete Edition. I don't know what they could have completed from last year to that one. And Marvel Spider-Man 2. So 2 new games, 1 game just with VR support, and 1 game with that Complete Edition, which I have no idea what it actually entails. But good for you, Sony. You like to rehash your games over and over again. Okay, let's put everything together now in this third section. The things that I mentioned at the start of the video, the topics and the opinions and the queries that I had, we're going to get into those now. So first of all, let me address the concern made in the first video, in part 1, about modern gameplay designs that expedite the adventure. So let me clarify what I meant by expedite the adventure. Expediency is basically the process of taking shortcuts, right? When the developers are giving you all of these tools, and I view them as expediting the adventure, I see them as shortcuts that could potentially undermine your experience when you play the game. It could result in something that is less fulfilling. It could result in less challenge, which also has to do with fulfillment. Whatever it may be. Expediency is not always or necessarily a bad thing. I mean, if you're shipping something and you want to get it into the customer's hands as quickly as possible, finding ways to take shortcuts is not necessarily a bad thing. But when it comes to something like this, like an adventure, not to sound too corny, but maybe a lot of video games, it's not necessarily about getting to the finish line and moving on to the next game right away. Maybe it's actually the journey that makes the game so much more fun, right? So that is just why I caution this desire to make everything quicker and easier. This is why I have to be a little bit careful that not every quality of life change actually detracts from your overall experience. You don't want things to be too easy that they're boring, and that can really easily happen. So let's now bring it forward with some concrete examples and actually remember some discussions a long time ago, feels like a decade ago, where a small fraction of gamers were bothered by Oblivion, and this continued into Skyrim, with having too much information available on their UIs, right? One of the main complaints was that I can see all of these different metrics and all these things on my screen. I'm not immersed in the game. I'm not immersed in the world and the RPG because I've got a stupid magic meter that's flashing at me. I've got a map that's always indicating where I'm supposed to be. My character doesn't have a compass. Why does he have a map? I heard similar things with The Witcher 3 and how investigating little problem areas, investigating things with your sense was almost rendered trivial because all you do is you hold down a button, Geralt starts using his scent ability, and whatever you're supposed to find to complete that little challenge or problem is glowing. So all you do is follow the glowing footsteps. All you do is follow the glowing blood. There's really nothing there other than holding a button and holding forward. So these are some interesting concerns, right? You can disagree with them, you can agree with them. This is the opinion section, okay? Another point about this stuff, Ubisoft games, Assassin's Creed, they're always pointing you in the right direction. How much is too much? How easy is too easy? And what about the games that I have played? So these are games pulled from the top 10 sellers. Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom. I didn't think that anything was made too easy in those games. Sure, you can have markers, objective markers. Sure, there's fast travel, but you had to unlock your fast travel. The world was designed in such a way that you could not simply fast travel and then instantly soar to wherever you're supposed to go. A lot of the time there are obstacles that you had to overcome to get around, to get over, whatever it may be. So those are the Zelda games for Nintendo. And I'm just going to list off the other Nintendo games from the top 10 sellers. I actually don't have too much to comment on as they relate to expediency because a lot of my problems with them, if I have problems, are more related to other aspects of the games. Other aspects of the gameplay just aren't that fun. But they don't really suffer from things being made too easy, from too much hand-holding. So those games are Super Mario Odyssey, Super Mario 3D World, Mario Kart 8, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, Animal Crossing New Horizons, Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, Pokemon Legends Arceus, and Pokemon Scarlet. I will say, Legends Arceus, one thing that it does do to prevent being too easy is it doesn't have a complete open world where you can go wherever you want all the time. It has zones, and within those zones, you just have a few places that you can teleport to. See, if you think about some of the symptoms, some of the common symptoms that these quality of life or hand-holding game mechanics have. You have fast travel. You have too many lives, or your character is like impervious to too many attacks, or too much invulnerability, things of that nature, right? Hard to say that Nintendo games really suffer from those things. Maybe it's things that you find more in action games. I think Nintendo's adventure games are very well made. Let's look at the non-Nintendo games. GTA 5. No, I would never say that they do too many things to expedite the adventure. GTA 5, all Grand Theft Auto games, they are what you make of them, as far as like driving around like a hooligan, getting into trouble, running over cops, running over pedestrians, getting into firefights. They've never been focused just on the adventure, so it's hard to really qualify that one. Monster Hunter World. Okay, here is one that definitely has a problem. I have a problem with it. I've said before that the glow flies were unnecessary. The whole time that you're playing the game, it is just swarming these glow flies around you to all of these items that you can pick up and use as crafting materials. And I feel like I'm not really exaggerating when I say you could play the game mashing your collect button and you're always going to be taking in materials. And it's not like crafting was trivialized for that reason, but it just didn't feel fun. It didn't make you have to go out of your way to get those materials. When you would go back to camp and it would actually be time to start crafting things, you often didn't even have all of the necessary materials and components. So you'd have to go back into the world and hunt a few specific monsters as well. There was just a redundancy and just this obnoxious factor to the fact that you could play the game like this. And you have to view it from the other way around too. Okay, well, what if you don't do that when you play the game? Then you're just letting go a bunch of free material. Why would you do that? Why would you let go of something that the game is trying to give you, right? It doesn't make sense to handicap yourself. So that's an example, I think, of poor gameplay design when they try to make it a little bit easier for you. Here are the glow flies showing you everything that you can pick up, and you're just expected to go like this when you play. No, I'm sorry, that's not how you design a collection system. Elden Ring. Elden Ring really is a bit of a challenging adventure, right? Your movement is pretty good on the overworld, but it's not broken. It's not like you're going to be parkouring and climbing everywhere you want. You can get a little creative. You can get a little bit mischievous with how you climb things that maybe you're not supposed to, but it's not like the game rewards you for doing that. So Elden Ring is a pretty balanced game, and it doesn't have hand-holding problems. Next, gameplay mechanics and trendy genres. This is probably what a lot of you have been waiting for. I'm going to continue talking about Twitch for one moment. So I want to ask, how has streaming influenced games and or game development, if at all? Should most games support online multiplayer in order to capitalize on streaming popularity? Because think about it. If you can get into that Twitch market, you're probably pretty good. More people are going to see your game and more people are going to want to try it for themselves, I think. Well, let's do this. Let's take a look at the top 10 sold games per year. And let's try to point out which games are exclusively single player, okay? Should games support online multiplayer? We'll find out. There were 2 exclusively single player games in 2017, both by Nintendo. There were 3 in 2018, 2 from Sony. 2 in 2019. 4, finally a reasonable amount, in 2020. Now, the multiplayer component for Tsushima released a year later, so in 2020 it was a single-player game. And 2 of them were from Sony. And then in 2021, 3 single-player games. 2022, back to 4, 2 from Sony again, and 4 once more in 2023. So, potentially 3 of the best games that we saw last year in 2023, they made it into the top 5, and they were all single-player. Hogwarts Legacy, Tears of the Kingdom, and Spider-Man 2. I also have to ask, is the trend of party games done? Or are party games still relevant as cash grabs? Let's take a look. Among Us released in 2018, but boomed in popularity in 2020, and the pandemic could be the reason why. Other games like chess also soared in popularity during the pandemic. We witnessed a lot of weird crossover tournaments where the biggest Twitch streamers were starting to get tutored by chess pros, and they were going to go at each other in these chess tournaments hosted on Twitch. Pandemic is wild for many reasons. Fall Guys officially released shortly after the spike in Among Us. Both games still maintain decent and varied popularity according to different sites, with Among Us being more popular. Now, this thing here about different sites, I mean, I looked at one site where it said Among Us still had 200,000 players active. I don't know. I looked at another site and it was below 100,000. So this issue of trying to get good information to make these kinds of videos, well, it's exactly that. It's an issue. I'm trying to do my best, everybody. I'm telling you, I spent a lot of time looking at different websites to make this video. I'm disappointed by how much information is hidden and how much information is not available. I don't know necessarily what information is credible either, but anyways. Next question. Will games purposefully be made to be humorous or to include jank? You know what I mean by jank. I'm going to mention Lethal Company. Now you should know exactly what I mean. Silly graphics that are kind of like that dirty looking cell shadedness. The monster designs are really unusual and the game just functions bizarrely. If you drop a ladder on somebody, it could just nick them and it kills them. So there's like jankiness. Not every hitbox is clean. Not every corner can be perfectly rounded. Things like that. So, Fortnite, Lethal Company, Among Us, Palworld, and more games like them are not to be taken seriously. From the graphics to the gameplay, it's clear that these games do not strive for realism or too much seriousness on behalf of the player, right? What are your expectations when you play Fortnite? And you just got killed by somebody wearing like a Naruto outfit, and they're hopping around and they're shooting their shotgun in the air, celebrating that they just killed you. What about somebody who starts swinging their pickaxe over your body? The other games too, Among Us, Palworld. Come on, Palworld, you're shooting these Pokemon clones with AK-47s. How are you supposed to take that seriously? But is that going to be the next trend? And is this something that is only being popularized because it's so funny to laugh at online? Is humor going to be one of the main selling points for the rest of the 2020s? Because that is how you crack into the online market. Who knows? Are these games merely the lucky few that got it right at the perfect time? I suspect that Palworld especially will show that no matter how silly your idea is, you should try to realize it as a playable game, right? Palworld is showing us that if you have an idea, no matter how absurd it is, just go for it. At the very least, try to get it to early access and use early access to gauge the game's potential success. You can change the price point, right? There's so many good things about early access and ways for new people to try your games today. You may as well just go for it. Next section here, let us discuss the genres that we've seen. First, I want to give you some of my assumptions about the trendy genres, the popular genres. So I had assumed that there was a rise of JRPGs in the West, and there was a rise of JRPG channels on YouTube also that I thought indicated that. Cozy games have also established a niche on YouTube, but aren't exactly mainstream or popular. Another assumption. Can Baldur's Gate 3 help make Western RPGs more popular again? Development times seem incredibly drawn out, and it's hard for me to name many between The Witcher 3 and Starfield. So, hard to say, because we haven't seen a lot of Western RPGs, but maybe more are around the corner. Third assumption. Action-adventure games like Zelda, shooters like COD, and sports games like EA's will always reign supreme. Now, of course, I got to look at the stats. I got to see the top 10 most sold games, so I'm not saying anything that's so crazy and out there. But, I mean, I am assuming that it's not going to change. Now, let's take a look at reality. So, once again, different sites have reported different findings. Some have broad inclusions for action games, including platformers and fighting in their action category, and they rank those as the most popular, with 40% of games being action. Other sites have differentiated the genres by platform, with PC having shooters, adventure, and role-playing as the most popular genres. Consoles had adventure, battle royale, and sports as their most popular, and mobile had role-playing, puzzle, and adventure. So just quickly looking at this, which ones do they have in common? Adventure, role-playing, and there were some unique ones like puzzle on mobile, which makes complete sense. And the final little tidbit from reality here, perhaps the only trend worth noting is that simulation games have climbed up above MMOs in popularity, with city builders and series like Train or Lawn Mowing Simulator. So simulation games in 2023, according to one particular site, they were above 20% popularity, and MMOs, World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy XIV, they were just below 20% popularity. Really funny to see, and really funny to think that Train Simulator and Lawn Mowing Simulator, those are leading the charge. And of course, City Skylines and games like that too, right? Okay. I have some more points to make about games. We see many more games today that are hybrids of genres. Think of how many games these days are infused with crafting and stats when those systems may not necessarily benefit them. To me, crafting in Elden Ring was not properly executed, and I rarely used it in my 120-hour adventure. Cooking in Zelda, however, proved far more useful to me. Not every enhancement was particularly useful when you could simply don the clothing for the desired effect, but I still relied more on cooked foods in Tears of the Kingdom than I did crafted assortments in Elden Ring. I've mentioned this before, Elden Ring is a 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 game, but you really could play 10 different builds before you actually have to rely or resort to the crafting. The crafting is just a thing to like fill up your inventory, to say that you got it, to say that you visited every shopkeeper. But in Tears of the Kingdom, you actually want to have some of those elixirs on hand. You actually want to have some of the food on hand to give yourself extra stamina wheels, extra hearts, to go into the final battle with Ganon, or whatever it may be. Now, this subtopic of the amalgamation of genres is one of the most interesting to me, so I would love to hear from all of you which games you think have pulled off the wildest, most successful amalgamations with as many genres as possible. And also the opposite, which games have ended up becoming the most broken, Frankenstein-like monstrosities, right? Which games absolutely do not work when you mash this genre together with this genre. Or there's just too much going on in a game. There's just too much that detracts from what the game is actually supposed to be. Again, I would really like to hear your own examples. At the end of all of this research and all this preparation, I wasn't exactly able to come up with too many of my own examples. Brain was a little bit fried, just like how my voice is getting a little bit fried. So yeah, please lay it on me, give me the examples. Which games worked out with tons of genres, and then which games did not. Next, let us discuss game length in a little more detail. While it was quickly dismissed earlier, it is interesting to note that many people feel as if they can play their favorite games for much longer. Games like Tears of the Kingdom and Baldur's Gate 3 feel almost infinitely long. And you hear this from so many people, oh my god, I have these games lined up, I'm not going to be able to play anything else for the rest of the year. Fair enough. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. While I did spend a lot of time on Zelda, it was never unenjoyable. I had more regrets putting 60 plus hours into Pokemon games, and I remember wishing that I could move on from them in a hurry, but still with some semblance of completion. So last year, when I was completing my Pokemon games so that I could make my ranking the mainline Pokemon games, I had to go back to Ultra Sun, I had to do a game over here and a game over there, and there were times when it was just a slog. I was thick in the middle of it, I only had 4 gym badges, but to say that I actually experienced as much of the game as I truly could, I didn't just want to go gym battle, gym battle, gym battle, gym battle. I wanted to still take some time catching Pokemon, still take some time filling out my Pokedex, get some of the TMs over there, go do a side quest if it exists in Pokemon. And it just wasn't that much fun. Could it have been because I was essentially replaying those games? Is it a problem with the games? I don't know. But all I do know is that when I played Tears of the Kingdom, and some people's criticism is that it's just too long, I pretty much never had a dull moment with it. Last point here. The perception or misperception of game length relates more to what I talked about in the last video and how we feel pressured for time in our day-to-day lives. I can't say whether or not games are created to last longer, but I would assume that they are not, unless they are designed around microtransactions. What more people need to understand is that it is not a wise financial decision to have gamers sticking to one single player game for so long when it does not contain any kind of DLC or microtransactions. If there's no more money to be made off that game outside of just raw sales, the studios or the investors are going to want you to move on to the next game. So it's not like developers are there. I mean, it depends on how passionate they are about the games, right? And this is where it's really interesting talking about gaming as a business versus gaming as passion, right? Which developers are doing which when they create their games. When games are a business, like I said, they do not want you playing the same game for 100 plus hours. They want you to finish that up and move on to the next one. Side note, if you think that there's an abundance of games to play, and you also believe that there are more games releasing than ever before, you probably have a point. I sometimes feel it as well. I just haven't looked into any numbers to actually verify that. Next, new IPs or continuing series. It was surprising to see a lack of new IPs created by Nintendo in their last 4 years, but it makes sense. They already have so many popular franchises and mascots, so they're not pressed to invent more. not only that, but they're also not struggling. Continuations of main series and spin-offs seem like smarter decisions, right? You also don't have many people asking for new characters. Most people want to see their old favorites in new games. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. As much as you think Nintendo is still the company that's creating games that are passion projects and are meant to be odes to the classics, in some ways that's true. Like whatever they're doing with Zelda, they're doing a great job with it. But when it comes to some of their other series, you really have to question the integrity of the company. And you can get a sense sometimes when some of their newer titles, whether it is Pokemon or is a Mario sports game especially, what are they doing? It's just, they're just rehashing the same thing. They're just releasing cash grabs. If you care, if you are a development company, about owning unique IPs and you have someone like Microsoft's money, then you can just wait for other studios to release their new games, to find success, and then you can acquire those studios. So it's unrelated to the broader topic, but I suspect that Nintendo owns the most unique IPs out of any of these companies because they have the most exclusives, right? Fair enough. It's like 1 + 1 = 2. Big whoop. All right. Next section. I promise we're getting to the end of the video. Thank you everybody who's been bearing with me all this time. Has the quality of games increased or worsened over the years? What aspects of games are prioritized? Gameplay, graphics, etc. Let's get into point number 1 with, I feel like the quality of games has increased overall. While many of my favorites are still relatively older games, I find myself more drawn to games released within the last decade and having a lot of fun with them. And if you want any evidence of that, you can check out my top 50 games, or you can check out my games beaten video in 2023. There are so many examples there, and I give a statistical breakdown of the games that I played by decade released. So you can see in my top 50 games of all time, how many games are there that were released in the 90s, in the 2000s, in the 2010s, etc. Same thing with my games beaten 2023. It feels as if certain publishers, namely Sony, consistently prioritize graphics and whatever mediocre stories they believe to be good above gameplay. Like I said, it feels, right? From an outsider's perspective, somebody who doesn't even own a PlayStation, everything that I see releasing on PlayStation looks like graphics, graphics, graphics. And then you get to something like the Game Awards, or even before the Game Awards. The story's so good. The characters are so good. How's the gameplay? The story's so good. It's like, whatever. I don't want to make fun of anybody. You know what? Nobody who I watch, nobody whose videos I commented on, you're not guilty of doing this, but I've seen other people on YouTube doing it and acting like that, and it's just ridiculous to me. So I could be wrong. They could be wrong. Who knows? Nintendo. Let me get my Nintendo fanboy glasses on, my Nintendo fanboy pants. Nintendo seems to prioritize gameplay. But, there's a but. Even when playing their most excellent games, I find myself getting bored or encountering tedium as the hours rack up. One game that springs to mind is Super Mario Odyssey. A less surprising example is Animal Crossing New Horizons, because you can all picture that. Although I'm still glad that I got to experience those games, and I wouldn't say that they're bad. Super Mario Odyssey, I talked about it in my most overrated games video, one of the two, I think the first one. And really, it was just that I was expecting so much more out of it in all facets of the game. And yes, including the story. And I know I just trash on PlayStation games for overemphasizing story, but there's always a balance. There's always a happy medium, and it's a wide threshold. It's not a fine line, okay? Maybe PlayStation games lean too heavily into story at the expense of other things, and Nintendo games, a big 3D Super Mario adventure. Why not have a little more story? Why make it so sanitized and so kid-friendly? Not even kid-friendly, practically non-existent. Peach gets kidnapped. Whoa! Bowser wants to marry her. Whoa! That's it. That's the story. That's the plot of Odyssey. And can't you give us a little bit more for the longtime fans of the series? Anyways, so sometimes it feels like Nintendo games could use spicing up with elements from other genres sprinkled in. And sometimes they need to be more complex or to have less downtime to remain engaging. Yoshi's Crafted World. Just give me a little bit of something different other than left to right, left to right. Okay, and the game is not purely left to right, but when you play so many levels over and over and over, it does start to feel that way. That is the feeling that you're left with, even if the game essentially is not that, because there aren't enough other gameplay elements. Maybe Yoshi could have different kind of shots. That would have been nice. Maybe Yoshi could have customized the eggs that he fires, different types of projectiles. Now we're talking. Okay, and the last point here about the quality of games. I love a game that knows what it wants to be and does it well. I'll briefly highlight a co-op game that I recently beat called Lovers in a Dangerous Space-Time. I'm going to show you guys some footage on screen here, and let me describe it for you. You are basically playing a mobile tower defense game. For lack of another word, I'm going to call it a tower defense. You are in the spaceship, and you and your co-op partners are driving around in space trying to rescue these cute little critters. And as you drive around space, hordes of enemies are going to come at you, or they're going to be defending the areas, guarding the critters that you're trying to save. You are going to be collecting all of these power-ups, and you're going to be installing them in your spaceship. You've got 4 turrets, and you're upgrading those turrets. Metal attachment, turn it into a flail. Laser attachment, make it blast enemies. Power attachment, make it shoot more rapidly. And you can do that on your boosters. You can do that on your shield. It's just a really fun game. It's frenetic. It nails every element of tower defense that you want, but it brings a lot of excitement because you're moving as you play the game. So it's relatively simple. And yet, in this niche little subgenre, it does so many things well. So that's what I mean. I want a game that knows what it wants to be and executes it well. So kudos to the developers of this game. I'm sorry that I don't know their name by heart right now, but I will put it up on the video because they deserve the spotlight. They deserve the attention. So there you go. Next section of queries. The prevalence of microtransactions. Have they increased, decreased, or remained the same? According to Video Game Insights, or VGI, VGinsights.com, I'm going to link that in the description as well. The percentage of games that contained microtransactions with over 100,000 units sold was steadily at or below 20% between 2018 and 2023. Does it include DLC? Probably not, although Day 1 DLC, in my opinion, should be a microtransaction, and we have seen a lot of Day 1 DLCs that are microtransactions, so I'm sure those are included. The percentage of games that contained microtransactions with over 1 million units sold has consistently been higher than the less popular games, and was steadily increasing between 2018 and 2022, but it then dropped in 2023. So what does it mean? The most successful games, which are presumably the games with the biggest budgets, tend to contain microtransactions between a quarter and a third of the time. Now, I don't think that those numbers are egregious. Certain companies, like Blizzard, they're more well-known for their microtransactions than other companies. And they probably paint a generalized picture of this being a bigger issue than it actually is. Right? It's just a public perception thing. We see the big companies doing it, and we assume that, oh my God, everyone's got microtransactions. Maybe, maybe not. You can see here that it's between a quarter and a third of the big games. People overlook how prevalent microtransactions are in Japanese games, with many JRPGs having more costume packs than Western games. And I would be curious to know whether Japanese games or Western games or non-Japanese games, whatever you want to call them, have more microtransactions. Who's actually the biggest offender for microtransactions? I would assume the West, but again, I don't think they're going to pull away with it that much. Is 2023 a sign that microtransactions will appear less frequently? Probably not. It would be helpful to have examples in front of us to see which games are responsible for these trends. I suspect that a year in which Nintendo is more successful probably reflects a drop in microtransactions, because I don't know Nintendo games for having a lot of microtransactions. So, for example, one of those years that the Switch was doing really well and released 16 games, or one of those years where the Switch had a lot of its games in the top 10, maybe microtransactions were relatively low, or they could have been higher had there been more non-Switch games that were more popular. Maybe I'm wrong. That's just what it feels like to me, though. Finally, the last section before wrapping up. Has the shelf life of games changed? Is it a new phenomenon? Does this make developers want to shorten development cycles? So when you look at what's popular on Twitch, you might think that games, single player at least, remain in the zeitgeist spotlight for much shorter durations than they used to, right? Because we saw games were always in and out of Twitch's top 5, you're probably thinking, man, no game is popular for long anymore. We're going to find out if that's true or not, or I'm going to be asking you. I have no recollection of what it was like when Ocarina of Time was released. It felt like Ocarina of Time maintained its popularity until the next big game came along. Majora's Mask was released a year and a half later, and when it did, my brother and I jumped ship to that. For those of you who were a little bit older than me at the time, do you recall playing many games between Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, or did Ocarina of Time truly and really occupy the bulk of your time? Was it months that you were playing Ocarina of Time? I'm so curious to know. I don't want to say that Ocarina of Time had a tremendously long shelf life because of its staggering renown or because it became one of the most popular games to speedrun over a decade later. I want to know whether it had longevity immediately following its release. So no retroactive assessment of how popular the game could have been just because we saw it booming in popularity more recently. That doesn't count. Compare Ocarina of Time to Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom. Breath of the Wild especially had people playing it and talking about it for more than just a month or two after its release. Maybe the biggest and best games managed to accomplish that regardless of what Twitch indicates about popularity. Maybe that's something that has not changed just because we've entered this YouTube era and this social media era. I genuinely do not know. Sometimes I look at a few examples and I think, man, these games are short-lived. And then other times I look at games like Elden Ring and I go, yeah, this is the best single-player game released in a long time, and people know it, and they're giving it the time that it deserves, and they're keeping it in the spotlight. I know that's not the case of every game, and there is some drop-off with the top 10 games, and then the games beyond that in the top 50, and the games beyond those in the top 100. I'm just really curious, and I don't know how to wrap my head around what the shelf life is for the popularity of these games, right? As for whether or not this shelf life issue has any bearing on developers, I can't say. No company ever wants really long development periods. The more time that you spend in development, the more money that you end up spending. I simply don't have enough information in front of me, nor have I spoken to any industry insiders. It would be interesting to hear their thoughts on this topic. So there aren't many issues where I feel like you have to get inside to know what's truly going on, but this video has exposed a couple of those things. The financials, and something like this. What do they actually feel when they're making the games? What do they observe about the games that are popular around them? And then how do they second guess their own projects? If somehow, as fate would have it, you are somebody who works in a popular video game development environment, maybe you want to talk to me privately, maybe you want to chime in the comments section. I would love to discuss some of these things further with you. So, I don't know, I'm just putting that prayer out there. I would love to talk to somebody from the gaming industry. Okay, let's finally wrap up. So we looked at stats for consumers and developers. I learned that Twitch is a very stagnant medium and that popularity should never be conflated with quality, right? Because in my opinion, those games that I see on Twitch, they are just not the highest quality games. Most popular, sure, but not the best. I learned that there were not as many remakes and remasters flooding the market as I originally thought. And again, that is something that, of course, you can disagree with because it's subjective. How many remasters and remakes are too many? We saw that Nintendo, if you had to average it out, it would maybe be every 3 or 4 out of 10 games, every 30 or 40% of their library is a remake or a remaster. I don't think that's that bad. Actually, don't forget, I was cutting out a lot of games too. So I think their remakes and remasters are actually fewer than that. Next, I shared my opinions and passive observations on some popular games and trendy game mechanics. We saw that there are no real surprises in which genres are most popular. That feels like it hasn't changed since platformers dominated up to the PlayStation 1, right? Improvements in 3D graphics brought in a new era of shooters, a new era of more immersive adventure games. And we shouldn't necessarily be surprised by that. I feel like when VR finally takes a hold of more households, we're going to see another shift in the most popular genres. Maybe shooters stay at the top, maybe adventure games stay at the top, but we could see more simulation games. Imagine controlling armies from VR. That could be really cool. And then finally, as for things like debating the quality of modern games, I mostly leave that up to you. So after watching both of these parts, or listening, however you got to enjoy these videos, I hope you enjoyed them, I want to hear about your opinions one more time maybe on the modern gamer from last video, maybe one more time on developer trends and what we're seeing today. But most importantly, how do you assess the modern gaming experience? And how do you assess the modern gaming industry and its landscape? right? What has happened to games overall? Better, worse, about the same, more games, fewer games? Who knows? I've made some of my assertions and I've given some of my opinions. I've given you as much data as I had time to collect. That is all that I have for this video. Like I said in the introduction, there are a lot of interesting topics that are worth discussing, and I probably will get to them in some other videos, but that is going to do it with this one. So, once again, thank you everybody so much for watching or listening. I'll try to edit as many of the stats and as many of the bits of information and data into the video and on the screen as possible. And that's about it for now. I gotta wrap it up. Thank you again for watching. Bye-bye for now. See you in the next video.